Captain Hanwoo Park stood before the Galactic Coalition Council, his 5-ton frame dwarfed by the towering 15-foot representatives from various species. The massive chamber made him feel tiny, like a child standing in a giant's castle. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above, and even the smallest decorative elements were larger than him. He kept his back straight and his chin high, refusing to be intimidated by their sheer size. Lieutenant Ji-Min Lee stood quietly beside him, her knuckles white as she gripped her datavat. Like Park, she wore the crisp black and gold uniform of Earth's Space Force. The fabric gleamed under the chamber's bright lights, a stark contrast to the muted colors favored by the Coalition species. Ambassador Krax, a massive being with gray-blue scaled skin and multiple sets of arms, leaned forward in his enormous chair. His movement cast a shadow over the two humans. "Your species is charming," he rumbled, his voice so deep it made the floor vibrate. "But surely you understand that modern warfare requires substantial physical presence. Your soldiers would be inadequate." Several other council members nodded in agreement. A few didn't even try to hide their amused smirks. To them, humans were barely more than clever pets, an interesting curiosity, but nothing to be taken seriously. Park had prepared for this moment for months. He activated his presentation, and holograms filled the air above their heads. Images of Earth's military achievements floated in the space. Tanks rolling across battlefields, ships cutting through ocean waves, and fighters soaring through the sky. "With all due respect, Ambassador," Park said, his voice clear and strong, "size isn't everything. Humans have fought and won wars for thousands of years. We've mastered combat in every environment our planet offers: land, sea, air, and even space." A tall, insect-like being clicked its mandibles in what passed for laughter among its kind. "Against other humans, perhaps. But look at yourselves. My youngest offspring is larger than your tallest warrior." Lee stepped forward, her voice steady despite her anger. "Then you should understand better than most how dangerous small things can be, council member. After all, don't the tiniest parasites often bring down the largest beasts?" A murmur ran through the chamber. Some council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Park noticed a few thoughtful looks among the derision. "Earth doesn't ask to lead your armies," Park continued. "We ask only for a chance to prove our worth as allies. The Coalition prides itself on unity through diversity. Surely there's room for a species that thinks differently, fights differently, and sees the world from a different perspective." Ambassador Krax waved one of his four hands dismissively. "Pretty words, Captain, but the Coalition's military strength comes from overwhelming force. Our ships are the largest in known space. Our ground forces can crush mountains. What could your tiny army possibly contribute?" Park smiled, pressing a button on his own datapad. The holograms changed, showing human special forces in action. Soldiers slipping through tight spaces, scaling walls, and moving with a speed and agility that made the larger council members blink in surprise. "Sometimes the smallest key opens the largest door," Park said. "Humans excel at adapting, at finding unexpected solutions. We've spent our history turning disadvantages into advantages. Give us a chance, and we'll show you what humanity can do." The council chambers fell silent. Park could see the conflict in their expressions. Most still doubted, but a few seemed intrigued. That was all he needed. A foothold, a chance. Admiral Zex, one of the few council members who had supported Earth's admission to the Coalition, spoke up. His crystalline body sparkled as he moved. "Perhaps there is wisdom in the captain's words. After all, did we not form this coalition because we recognized that different species bring different strengths?" More murmurs filled the chamber, but this time they sounded more thoughtful than dismissive. Park kept his expression neutral, but inside he felt a spark of hope. They hadn't won the council over, not yet, but they'd planted a seed of doubt in their certainty. "Very well," Ambassador Krax finally said. "Earth may contribute a token force to the Coalition military. But remember, Captain, you asked for this chance. Do not make us regret giving it to you." As Park and Lee left the chamber, they could hear the council members already discussing their quaint presentation. But neither officer minded. They had achieved their goal, getting a foot in the door. "They'll learn," Lee said quietly as they walked through corridors designed for giants. "Sooner or later, they'll learn what humans can do." Park nodded, already planning their next steps. The council thought they had given Earth a small, meaningless concession. They didn't realize they had just handed humanity exactly what it needed, an opportunity to prove itself. Ahead of them, the massive doors of the council chamber swung shut with a resonating boom. But Park smiled, knowing that the real story was just beginning. Sometimes the biggest changes started with the smallest steps, and humanity was ready to take those steps, no matter how giant their new allies might be. The emergency broadcast cut through every channel across Coalition space, its urgent signal overriding all other communications. Colonel Daho Kim was in the middle of his meal when the alarms began blaring through Earth's military base on New Saturn. He dropped his chopsticks and ran to the command center, his heart pounding. The tactical displays showed a nightmare unfolding in real time. 3 Coalition outposts, massive space stations that had stood for centuries, were nothing but debris fields now. The attack had come without warning, without demands, without mercy. "Play it again," Kim ordered, his eyes fixed on the main screen. The footage showed strange ships emerging from what appeared to be tiers in space itself. They were smaller than Coalition vessels, but moved with incredible speed and precision. The attacking force struck like lightning and vanished just as quickly, leaving destruction in their wake. Lieutenant Song brought up the initial reports. "They're calling themselves the Drachnid Empire. Sir, no prior contact, no known history. They just appeared from the unexplored regions of the Carina Arm." Kim watched as the Coalition's response fleet moved into position. The massive warships were beautiful in their way, each one the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Under normal circumstances, such a show of force would have been enough to make any aggressor think twice. But the Drachnid weren't fighting normally. "Look at that," Kim muttered, pointing to a particular sequence. "Their ships are running circles around our heavy cruisers. It's like watching elephants try to catch mosquitoes." The Coalition's traditional doctrine was failing before their eyes. Their huge ships, designed to overwhelm enemies with sheer size and power, couldn't track the faster, smaller Drachnid vessels. Their weapons, meant to destroy large targets, struggled to lock onto the agile attackers. "Their weak points are in their infrastructure," Kim said, studying the enemy patterns displayed across multiple screens. "But their defensive grids are calibrated for large-scale threats. They're expecting capital ships, not something smaller." The command center buzzed with activity as more reports came in. The Drachnid were striking across multiple sectors, always following the same pattern: hit hard, hit fast, and disappear before the Coalition could mount an effective response. "Sir," called out Captain Lee from his station. "Coalition Command is ordering all members to contribute to the defense fleet. They're mobilizing everything they have." Kim shook his head. "More big ships won't solve this problem. We need to think differently." He pulled up the scans of Drachnid technology they'd managed to gather. "Look here, their ships are advanced, but their bases show signs of conventional design. They need supply lines, maintenance facilities, fuel depots." The other officers gathered around his display. Kim pointed to several key features in the Drachnid infrastructure. "Their defensive systems are impressive, but they're all designed to repel large-scale attacks. They're expecting dreadnoughts and battle fleets, not." He trailed off, a plan forming in his mind. The other officers waited, knowing that look in their commander's eyes. "Get me a secure line to Earth Command," Kim ordered. "And pull up everything we have on small unit tactical operations in space. I think I know how we can hurt them." As his staff rushed to comply, Kim remembered the dismissive looks from the Coalition Council just months ago. They had laughed at humanity's tiny military force. But now, facing an enemy that their massive ships couldn't defeat, Perhaps being small wasn't such a disadvantage after all. The tactical displays continued to show coalition losses mounting. Their mighty warships, pride of the galaxy, were being picked apart by an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. But where others saw only disaster, Kim saw opportunity. "Send word to all human military units in coalition space," he ordered. "Tell them to start preparing for asymmetric warfare operations. The coalition taught us that size means power. Now we'll teach them that sometimes the smallest blade cuts the deepest." As he watched another coalition dreadnought fall to the Drachnid's lightning raids, Kim felt a grim smile spread across his face. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived so long on their violent homeworld. Sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. "Begin operation planning," he announced to his staff. "It's time to show the galaxy what humanity's tiny army can really do." The command center hummed with renewed purpose as officers began drafting plans and coordinating with other human units. They might be the smallest species in the coalition, but they had something the others didn't: millennia of experience in fighting against larger, stronger opponents. The Drachnid Empire was about to learn that lesson the hard way. Major Yuna Choi stood before the coalition military command, her voice firm despite being the smallest person in the massive war room. The holograms behind her showed detailed schematics of Drachnid installations, with human figures added for scale comparison. "Our size isn't a weakness, it's an advantage," she declared, pointing to specific sections of the display. "Human special forces can infiltrate spaces your soldiers physically cannot access. While your troops are trying to breach main gates, we can slip through maintenance ducts and strike from within." The coalition commanders shifted uncomfortably in their oversized chairs. Their recent losses to the Drachnid had shaken their confidence, but accepting help from the tiny humans seemed to pain them. Admiral Jun Seo Kang stood up beside Choi, his presence lending weight to her words. "Look at these simulations," Kang said, activating a new set of holograms. The display showed human soldiers moving through spaces that would be impossibly small for other coalition species. "Our teams can move through maintenance ducts, ventilation systems, and access panels designed for repair drones. We can strike where they least expect it." A massive tentacled commander named Grohl rumbled in disagreement. "This is not warfare. Sneaking through pipes like vermin. The coalition fights with honor, with strength." Choi's eyes flashed. "With respect, Commander, how is your honorable warfare working against the Drachnid? 3 more outposts fell yesterday. Their hit-and-run tactics are bleeding you dry, and your mighty warships can't even catch them." The room fell silent. Even Grohl couldn't argue with the truth of her words. Admiral Kang brought up footage from Earth's military history, showing human special forces in action across various terrains. "Humans have been perfecting these tactics for thousands of years," he explained. "We learned long ago that sometimes the smallest warrior can deal the deadliest blow. Every space station, every base, every ship has these small access ways. They're necessary for maintenance, for repair drones, for emergency systems." Choi continued, "The Drachnid, like you, build everything on a massive scale, but they leave these small spaces because they have to. They never considered them a threat because, like you, they think bigger means better." She pulled up detailed scans of a Drachnid supply depot. "See these maintenance tunnels. To your soldiers, they're cramped spaces barely big enough for repair drones. To us, they're perfect infiltration routes. We can move entire squads through them, plant explosives, sabotage critical systems, all without ever being detected." One of the commanders, a crystalline being named Vex, leaned forward. "But surely their security systems are designed to detect large-scale threats," Choi finished. "Their sensors look for capital ships, for massive energy signatures, for large groups of troops. A few human soldiers, we're smaller than some of their maintenance equipment. We're literally beneath their notice." Admiral Kang activated another simulation, this one showing a complete infiltration operation. A single squad of human special forces could disable a Drachnid base from within. While their defenses are focused on repelling large-scale attacks, we strike at their heart. The coalition commanders watched in silence as the simulation played out. Human soldiers moved through maintenance systems, planted charges at critical points, and disappeared before anyone knew they were there. The entire base went dark with minimal casualties and maximum effect. "We don't need to match their ships in battle," Choi said quietly. "We just need to cut off their supply lines, disable their repair facilities, destroy their fuel depots. 1,000 tiny cuts instead of one massive blow." A low murmur filled the room as the commanders discussed among themselves. Choi could see the reluctance in their faces warring with desperate need. The Drachnid were winning, and pride was becoming a luxury they couldn't afford. Finally, Supreme Commander Axon spoke. "Your proposal has merit, but can your soldiers really accomplish these operations? The risks would be extreme." Choi smiled. "Supreme Commander, humanity has always faced bigger, stronger opponents. We're still here because we learned to turn our weaknesses into strengths. Give us a chance to prove what we can do." The command room fell silent again as Axon considered. Around him, the other commanders waited, their massive forms still except for nervous twitches and shifting limbs. "Very well," Axon declared. "You have authorization for one operation. Show us what your tiny warriors can do, Major Choi. The Coalition's resources are at your disposal." As Choi and Kang left the command center, she allowed herself a small smile. The Coalition had just handed humanity exactly what they needed, a chance to prove their worth. Their size, so long mocked by their allies, would become their greatest weapon. "They still think we're taking a desperate gamble," Kang said quietly as they walked through the oversized corridors. "Let them think that," Choi replied. "Sometimes the best advantage is being underestimated. The Drachnid are about to learn what humans have known for millennia. The deadliest predators aren't always the biggest ones." Sergeant Min Ji-song moved silently through the dim maintenance shaft, her night vision showing the path ahead in shades of green. The access tunnel, designed for repair drones, felt almost spacious to her human frame. Behind her, 5 other soldiers followed in perfect silence, each carrying enough explosives to cripple the massive Drachnid command station. The station's regular corridors towered 3 stories high, built for the giant Drachnid warriors. But these maintenance shafts, these forgotten spaces between the walls, were perfectly sized for human infiltrators. Song's team had studied the layout for weeks, memorizing every turn and junction in the labyrinth of service tunnels. "Junction point ahead," she whispered into her comm unit. "Team 2, status." "In position at the secondary reactor controls," came the quiet response. "No contact with enemy forces. These tunnels are empty except for maintenance drones." Song smiled behind her tactical mask. The Drachnid, like their coalition enemies, fought too big. Their security systems watched for capital ships, for armies, for threats that matched their own massive scale. They never thought to guard against something as small as a human strike team. The maintenance shaft opened into a wider service area. Repair drones sat inactive in their charging stations, their bulky forms nearly as large as the humans. Song's team moved past them like ghosts, their footsteps silent on the metal grating. "Like our ancestors who used their small size to navigate cave systems," she whispered to her team. "We'll show them why being underestimated is a tactical advantage. Set charges at points Alpha through Delta. Remember, we're not here to destroy the station, just to make it stop working." Her soldiers spread out, placing compact but powerful explosive devices at crucial junctions. These weren't the crude bombs of earlier wars. Each charge was precisely calibrated to disable specific systems without causing catastrophic damage. The goal wasn't to kill. It was to demonstrate that nowhere was truly secure against human infiltration. A maintenance drone whirred to life nearby. The team froze, their adaptive camouflage blending with the walls. The drone rolled past, its sensors designed to detect mechanical failures, not living infiltrators. Song waited until it turned the corner before signaling her team to continue. "Central reactor control access in 20 meters. her navigator reported. Thermal readings show minimal activity. Looks like they really do leave all the maintenance to automated systems. Song led them to a junction where several shafts met. Above them, they could hear the deep, rumbling voices of Drachnid crew members in the main corridor. The aliens' heavy footsteps made the whole shaft vibrate slightly. Final charges in place, reported Team 2. Beginning withdrawal to extraction point Beta. Song's team reached the reactor control access. Through small gaps in the panels, they could see the massive chamber beyond. Drachnid technicians moved around equipment sized for giants, never thinking to look for enemies in the tiny maintenance spaces. Set the final charges, Song ordered. Remember, precision over power. We want them to know this wasn't an accident. Her demolitions expert worked quickly, placing charges that would overload crucial systems without causing a catastrophic meltdown. The Drachnid would be able to prevent disaster, but only after their station had been completely disabled. All charges set. Timer synchronized with Team 2's explosives. We have 15 minutes to clear the blast radius. Song took one last look through the access panel. The Drachnid continued their work, utterly unaware that their command station was about to be crippled by enemies they had dismissed as too small to be a threat. Begin withdrawal, she ordered. Maintain calm silence until we reach the extraction point. The team moved back through the maintenance tunnels with practiced ease. Every turn, every junction had been memorized. They passed more maintenance drones, more charging stations, more proof that the Drachnid, for all their technological advancement, had the same blind spot as most large species. They never looked down. They reached their extraction point with 5 minutes to spare. The small maintenance airlock, designed for external repair drones, was just large enough for their human-sized shuttle to dock with it. As they boarded their craft, Song allowed herself a small smile. All teams aboard, she reported to command. Clearing blast radius now. Their shuttle detached and moved away from the station, its stealth systems making it virtually invisible against the backdrop of space. At exactly the designated time, precisely placed explosions rippled through the Drachnid command station. Systems failed in careful sequence. Power grids collapsed. Communications went dark. The massive station, pride of the Drachnid fleet, was reduced to a floating hulk without a single casualty. Operation Mosquito complete, Song reported. Mission accomplished. Time to show the galaxy why size isn't everything. As their shuttle rendezvoused with their hidden carrier, Song watched the Drachnid station growing smaller in the distance. The giant aliens would survive, would rebuild, would adapt their defenses, but they would never again make the mistake of ignoring something just because it was small. Sometimes, she thought, the smallest blade made the deepest cut. Captain Taeyong Ryu paced before the holographic display, watching his strike teams prepare for their latest missions. The briefing room, originally designed for giant coalition soldiers, had been modified with human-sized furniture and equipment. It was a small change that represented a massive shift in thinking. 3 weeks had passed since Operation Mosquito's stunning success. The Drachnid command station, once thought impregnable, had been disabled without firing a single shot. Now, coalition commanders who had once laughed at humanity's tiny army were practically begging for human strike teams. The Drachnid never considered that their greatest threat would come from below. Ryu explained to a group of coalition commanders who towered over him. Their entire defense doctrine is based on repelling large-scale attacks. They have no effective countermeasures against human-sized strike teams. The massive alien officers watched intently as Ryu brought up detailed mission footage. The holograms showed human soldiers slipping through maintenance tunnels, bypassing security systems, and striking at critical infrastructure. It was warfare on a scale the coalition had never considered before. Look here, Ryu pointed to a particular sequence. Their defense systems are watching for capital ships, for massive energy signatures. But a human strike team. We're literally smaller than their maintenance drones. To their sensors, we're background noise. A crystalline commander named Vex leaned forward, his faceted body catching the light. But surely they'll adapt. They must realize their vulnerability by now. Ryu smiled. They're trying, but they're thinking like giants. They're reinforcing their main corridors, adding more heavy weapons, building bigger walls. But they can't eliminate their maintenance systems, their access tunnels, their repair ducts. Their entire infrastructure depends on these small spaces existing. He brought up new tactical displays showing multiple Drachnid facilities. Every station they build, every base they construct, has to have these access ways. They can't function without them. And as long as these spaces exist, we can use them. The success stories were mounting. In the past week alone, human strike teams had disabled 3 Drachnid supply depots, 4 communication hubs, and 2 shipyards. The mighty Drachnid Empire was being picked apart by enemies they could barely see. Your species fights with remarkable efficiency, rumbled Admiral Kraz, his massive form casting shadows across the room. We were wrong to dismiss you based on size. Ryu nodded, remembering the same Admiral's dismissive comments just months ago. Size isn't everything, he said. Humans learned that lesson long ago. Sometimes the smallest key opens the largest door. He activated another simulation, showing their next series of targets. The Drachnid's weakness isn't in their weapons or their ships. It's in their thinking. They believe that power comes from size, from strength. They never stop to consider that being small could be an advantage. The briefing room hummed with activity as more mission details were uploaded. Human strike teams across coalition space were preparing for coordinated attacks. What had started as a desperate gamble had become a revolution in warfare. Each of these targets, Ryu continued, highlighting key positions, is crucial to Drachnid operations. Their ships are fast, their weapons are powerful, but without support infrastructure, without supply lines, without maintenance facilities, they're just expensive pieces of metal floating in space. The coalition commanders watched as he laid out the strategic plan. It wasn't about matching the Drachnid ship for ship or trying to overpower their defenses. It was about striking where they were weakest, using their own assumptions against them. We don't need to destroy their fleet, Ryu explained. We just need to make it impossible for them to operate effectively. Cut off their supplies, disable their repair facilities, disrupt their communications. 1,000 small cuts instead of one big blow. As the briefing concluded, Ryu could see the change in the coalition commanders' eyes. They were beginning to understand what humanity had known for millennia, that sometimes the deadliest predator was the one you never saw coming. Your strike teams have full authorization to proceed, Admiral Kraz announced. The coalition fleet will provide whatever support you require. Ryu nodded, already focusing on the missions ahead. The tide of war was turning, not through overwhelming force or superior firepower, but through the precise application of small unit tactics that the Drachnid had never considered a threat. As he watched his teams make their final preparations, Ryu felt a surge of pride. Humanity had turned what others saw as a weakness into their greatest strength. The galaxy was learning what Earth had known all along: never underestimate something just because it's small. The war wasn't over, but for the first time since the Drachnid appeared, victory seemed possible. And it would come not from the largest ships or the strongest weapons, but from the tiny warriors that everyone had once laughed at. Admiral Sun Cho sat in her office aboard the coalition flagship, reviewing holographic battle reports with a sense of deep satisfaction. The display showed 15 Drachnid strongholds, each marked with a green indicator signaling their complete shutdown by human special forces teams. Her tiny army had accomplished in 1 month what the coalition's massive fleet couldn't do in 6. The door chimed, and a towering coalition commander entered, having to duck under the doorframe, despite the room's vast size. It was Supreme Commander Axon, his crystalline form catching the light from the holographic displays. Admiral Cho, he rumbled, his voice carrying the new note of respect that had been absent just months ago. Your latest operations report is impressive. Cho stood, though even standing she barely reached his waist. Thank you, Supreme Commander. Would you like to review the details of our recent missions? Axon settled into the reinforced chair especially designed for his massive frame. Please, the War Council is particularly interested in your infiltration techniques. Several member species have requested human military advisors. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. These were the same species who had once dismissed humanity as too small to contribute meaningfully to coalition defense. Now they were practically begging for human expertise. Size isn't everything, Cho said, bringing up detailed mission footage. Humans have millennia of experience in asymmetric warfare. Sometimes, the smallest blade makes the deepest cut. The holograms showed human strike teams moving through maintenance shafts, disabling critical systems, and vanishing before the Drachnid even realized they were under attack. Each operation was a masterpiece of precision and timing. Look here, Cho pointed to a particular sequence. This team disabled the major Drachnid shipyard by targeting its power distribution network. They never needed to engage the enemy directly. The entire facility went dark without a single shot fired. Axon watched intently. The Drachnid are adapting their defenses, yet your teams continue to succeed. How? Cho smiled. They're still thinking like giants, Supreme Commander. They've added more guards, more weapons, more security systems, but they're all designed to stop large-scale threats. Meanwhile, our soldiers slip through gaps smaller than their security drones. She brought up new tactical data showing future operation plans. The Drachnid built their empire on the assumption that bigger means better. Their ships, their stations, their weapons, everything is designed to overwhelm through sheer size. But they can't eliminate the small spaces in their infrastructure. Those maintenance tunnels, those access shafts, they're essential for their operations, and perfect infiltration routes for human-sized warriors. Axon finished, understanding dawning in his crystalline features. Exactly. Every defense they build against us just makes their facilities larger, more complex, creating more points of vulnerability for our teams to exploit. The latest reports were still coming in. 3 more Drachnid bases had gone dark in the past hour alone. The mighty empire was being dismantled piece by piece, not by the coalition's massive warships, but by small teams of human soldiers they couldn't even see. Your species has proven its worth many times over, Axon admitted. The coalition was short-sighted to judge you by size alone. Cho brought up footage from the early days of the war, showing coalition dreadnoughts failing to catch the swift Drachnid ships. We all had to learn new ways of thinking. The Drachnid taught us that bigger isn't always better in ship combat. Humans are teaching everyone that sometimes the greatest strength comes from being underestimated. A priority message flashed across her display. Another successful operation. A major Drachnid supply hub had just been neutralized by a single squad of human infiltrators. The war isn't over, Cho said, studying the new data. But the Drachnid are learning what humanity has known for thousands of years. Never discount an opponent just because they're small. Axon stood, his massive form casting shadows across the room. The War Council meets in an hour. They'll want to hear your recommendations for expanding the human training program. Cho nodded, already planning the next phase of operations. The coalition was finally beginning to understand what Earth had known all along, that true power didn't come from size or strength, but from adaptation, innovation, and the courage to use every advantage, no matter how small. As Axon left, Cho turned back to her tactical displays. More mission reports were coming in, each one a testament to human ingenuity and the power of being underestimated. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's tiny army was leading that change, one precisely placed strike at a time. The smallest blade indeed made the deepest cut, and the Drachnid Empire was bleeding from 1,000 such wounds, never seeing the hand that wielded the knife until it was too late. The massive coalition assembly hall gleamed under the light of 1,000 stars visible through its transparent dome. General Hyun-Woo Lee stood at the podium, his small frame drawing every eye in the vast chamber. Though he barely reached the height of most species' waists, There was no trace of the mockery that had once filled these halls when humans spoke. The Drachnid Empire had fallen 3 days ago. Their last stronghold had gone dark not with a thunderous battle, but with the quiet precision of human strike teams slipping through maintenance shafts. Their mighty fleet, cut off from supplies and support, had surrendered without firing a shot. The Drachnid Empire fell not to the largest army, but to the most adaptable one, Lee declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. In demonstrating the power of human-scale warfare, we haven't just won a war. We've revolutionized how the coalition will approach conflict for generations to come. The assembled representatives of 100 worlds listened in respectful silence. Many of them had once laughed at humanity's tiny army. Now they competed for human military advisors, eager to learn the tactics that had brought down an empire. Lee gestured to the holographic displays showing key moments from the war. Look at these victories, not won through overwhelming force or superior firepower, but through precision, adaptability, and the courage to think differently. The images showed human strike teams moving through spaces the Drachnid had never thought to guard, turning the enemy's assumptions about size and power against them. Each operation was a masterpiece of tactical innovation. The phrase, human-sized, is no longer an insult in military circles. Lee continued, a slight smile playing at his lips. It has become a mark of elite status, representing precision, stealth, and decisive action. Admiral Kraz, who had once dismissed humans as too small to matter, nodded in agreement. His massive form dwarfed those around him, but his respect for humanity's achievements was clear. We came to the coalition as the smallest member species, Lee said. Many thought we had nothing to contribute, but we brought with us something more valuable than size or strength. We brought millennia of experience in turning apparent weaknesses into strengths. The displays shifted to show the new training facilities being built across coalition space. Special operations centers designed to teach human tactics to other species warriors. The future of warfare was changing, and humanity was leading that change. Our size forced us to think differently, to find ways to overcome larger opponents, Lee explained. On Earth, we learned that the smallest predator could bring down the largest prey through intelligence and adaptation. The Drachnid learned this lesson too late. He brought up footage from the final days of the war. Drachnid strongholds falling one by one, not to massive fleet actions, but to small teams striking at critical weaknesses. The mighty empire had crumbled from within, defeated by an enemy they could barely see. This victory belongs to every species in the coalition, Lee declared. We all had to learn new ways of thinking, new approaches to warfare. The future belongs not to the largest or the strongest, but to those willing to adapt, to innovate, to see opportunity where others see weakness. The assembly hall erupted in applause, the sound thunderous in the vast space. Lee stood quietly, remembering the dismissive looks and patronizing comments from just months ago. How quickly things had changed. As Supreme Commander of Coalition Special Operations, he continued when the applause died down. I pledge to continue this revolution in military thinking. Size, strength, and overwhelming force will always have their place, but they are no longer the only path to victory. The new training programs were already showing results. Species that had once relied solely on their massive size were learning the value of precision and stealth. The phrase, think like a human, had become a compliment in military circles. The galaxy is changing, Lee concluded. The Drachnid taught us that bigger isn't always better. Humanity taught everyone that smaller doesn't mean weaker. Together, we're building a coalition that values all contributions, all perspectives, all approaches to solving problems. As he stepped down from the podium, Lee caught sight of his reflection in the polished surface. He smiled, remembering the first time he'd stood in this hall, feeling impossibly small among the giant alien species. Now he stood tall, proud not of humanity's size or strength, but of their ability to turn adversity into advantage. The victory celebration continued around him, but Lee's mind was already on the future. The war was over, but the revolution in military thinking was just beginning. Humanity's greatest contribution to the coalition wasn't their fighting strength or their tactical brilliance. It was teaching the galaxy that true power came in all sizes. The stars shone brightly through the assembly hall's dome, witnesses to a new era in galactic history, an era where being human-sized meant being elite, where the smallest blade could make the deepest cut, and where victory belonged not to the largest army, but to the most adaptable one.